Hello and welcome to Life on Board AmyJo, and this week we're trying something different. We've been to Chester and vlogged about it so many times, but never actually shown you around the city. So this vlog we're going to show you Chester and its historical past. And one of the best ways we've found to view the city is to walk round its historic city walls. Chester's city walls are the oldest, longest and most complete in Britain, parts of which are almost 2,000 years old and form an almost complete circuit of the former medieval city, with a total walkway length of 2.95 kilometres or 1.8 miles. Chester's the only city in Britain that retains the full circuit of its ancient defensive walls. Main access to the walls is at each of the four main gateways: Northgate, Eastgate, Watergate and Bridgegate. Plus there are many other steps around the city, some included in accessible ramps. We're starting our walk here at Watergate, which is nearest the canal basin. In earlier centuries the River Dee was a far mightier waterway than it is today, and large ships would discharge their cargoes at wharves situated immediately alongside the city walls. Until the start of the 14th century, the existing structure of the ancient walls and towers provided adequate to the port's defence, but as the silting of the Dee estuary started to badly affect the depth of water available to shipping, it was deemed necessary to extend the defences further out into the river, and as a result in 1322 the water tower was built. Over succeeding centuries the river silted further, nautical trade seriously declined, and Chester lost its ancient position as the principal seaport of northern England. And this is what the water tower looks like today, and it's nowhere near the river. Now here's another view of what was the harbour. It's now bowling greens. This impressive building is now part of a set of apartments. However, in its early days it used to be the infirmary, and if I move over a little bit and zoom in, you can just make out the words infirmary on the roof, on the apex there. Two ornate looking buildings, the first one here more so than the other, is one of Chester's big private schools. This was Queen's School, or still is Queen's School, and in the early days it used to be a girls' school, and there's an equivalent school called King's School, which are for boys, but it's that large. It owns these very nicely kept fields just opposite on the other side of the road. We're now stood on the arch as known as Watergate Street, and this street would have led down to the Rue Dee. And this is what Watergate would have looked like in the days when Chester was a major seafaring port. Now the racecourse in Chester is quite an affluent racecourse as it goes, and here you can see one of the bars and restaurants that have bound the racecourse perimeters. This is virtually the main entrance into Chester's racecourse. This is the view of the racetrack itself and all the associated buildings. And Chester's racecourse is unique in some respects to other racecourses, in as much as when the races are run, they run in the opposite direction to what most races are run. I can't remember which way round it is, but if they go left to right, then here they go right to left. And the other thing is it's a circular course, which is unusual. There are not many circular courses. And the final one, there are no jumps. It's just a race course. There's no hurdles, there's no water jumps or anything. But what's really significant about the race course is originally this whole area was a harbour, a Roman harbour. And it came in from the River Dee to this point where the Romans would unload all their ships as they came in from Rome and across other countries in Europe. So it's quite unique, and there are still traces of the original Roman wharf if we can find them. This area became known as the Rue Dee, after the rood or stone cross that stood on an eye or island in the marsh. You can still see it today. The first horse race was held here at the Rue Dee on February 9th, 1539, to replace the violent games of football that had traditionally taken place here. Henry G was mayor of Chester at the time, and it was because of his surname that racehorses are still known as GGs today. The races were held on Shrove Tuesday until 1609, when the date was moved to St George's Day, 23rd of April. Racing was interrupted in the 1640s and 1650s by the Civil War and its aftermath, but quickly resumed after the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. By the 18th century, the races held in the first week of May had become one of the most important social events in Cheshire. So the pile of rocks in the grass there by the gentleman going down the steps, that is all that remains of the original sea wharf from the Roman times, when the Romans used this as a harbour. I apologise for the traffic, it's quite busy here today. This original model of Thomas Harrison's design for the Grosvenor Bridge was restored and resited here by the Chester Civic Trust in 1979. It was built to show the dignitaries how the bridge would work and prove the fact that it was capable of being built. Not a very good video, but that's the actual bridge that it's modelled on. The Grosvenor Bridge. Chester also has its own castle, obviously built after the Roman times. I videoed this board because it lists most of the main attractions in Chester. You can pause and zoom in if anything takes your fancy, but it's accompanied by this lovely map to show you where they are. I think you'd lost the city walls, but they actually cross the road, or the road crosses through them, and this is the walls which flank the River Dee. This building here used to be a hydroelectric power station. You can see the inlets at the bottom there. It's long defunct now, not used at all. And at this point on the walls we get to the weir, or Salmon Leap as it's called. And this is where the river becomes non-tidal upstream and tidal downstream. And as you can see, because of the rains we've had, there's a lot of water flowing over. That direction is Hambridge. This is the Old Dee Bridge. It's the oldest bridge in the city, and it crosses the River Dee, carrying the road that leads from the bottom of Lower Bridge Street and the bridge gate to Hambridge. The original bridge was built for the Romans and probably had stone piers to carrying timber carriageway. In this direction takes you up into Chester City itself, the city centre. But the pub there, Bear and Billet, is one of the oldest pubs in Chester. These steps that I'm stood on are known as recorder steps, and they were built for the convenience of a robber Cumberbatch. And that's not Robert Cumberbatch up the top there, that's Smudge. Anchoress, of course. In the courts of England and Wales, the term recorder has two distinct meanings. The senior circuit judge of a borough or city is often awarded the title of honorary recorder. However, recorder is also used to denote a person who sits as a part-time circuit judge. This is the River Dee, or the non-tidal part, and we're in what we call the Groves. And there's a bandstand here where they used to have bands playing music in the Victorian age. And the big boats you can see there, this is Chester boats. And these are, you can hire these and take boat trips up the River Dee. And they even get canal boats on here, because the wide beam down there is actually static, because it's the offices of the people that own Chester boats. They actually needed an office nearby on the river, so they had this wide beam built, and that is now their office. The bridge across there is an iron bridge, and it links both halves of Chester, and you can walk across it, and if you carry on to the left it takes you to the meadows, which we won't see from the walls, but also to this Roman looking building, which is actually Chester's museum.
Come on, you're slow. Next one to go through.
Most people have probably found out by now that Chester was originally a Roman garrison town, and a few years ago they unearthed these remains, which turns out to have been a Roman bath. The area in the centre with the mosaic would have been the bath itself, although what we're looking at is the base of it. The actual water section would have been higher than that, and the heating would have come underneath, like this section here. Going up that way, aren't we?
Yeah. Smoke is having others been.
By the 1930s, traffic congestion in the area had become particularly bad. A wider gateway was needed, so a new, wider and taller gate was built, and is now known as Newgate. Just across the road there is Chester's Amphitheatre, and you're only seeing a small portion of it. But a time team dig some years ago discovered that it is one of the largest amphitheatres in Europe. They've never seen anything on the scale of this. It was 3 stories high, which is unusual for Roman amphitheatres, which makes it quite unique in the UK. Being so old, of course, the Chester walls do suffer for some collapses and damage, and there is an ongoing programme, as you can see here, to keep the walls and preserve them. There's an awful lot of work to be done. So this is a 28-metre stretch of the wall. Not that you can see it, of course, but they've put an extra walkway in on scaffolding so that we can carry on our walk around the walls. But there's lots and lots of repair work going on and planned, as you can see by these posters. The King Charles Tower has got a crack in it, needs repairing, for instance. And all these posters give you indication of what type of work needs to be done. And as you can see, and what has been done, yes. It's quite extensive. And now we're able to rejoin the original walls and carry on our walk through the town centre. We're now nearing the oldest section of the city and the walls, and just up ahead is a famous landmark that Chester's well known for. The clock's faces and mechanism were paid for by Edward Evans Lloyd, a local solicitor and freeman of the city, while the cost of the tower was financed by public subscription, and the city corporation were to pay for its subsequent maintenance. The clock mechanism was made in 1897 by J.B. Boyce and Company of Whitchurch, Shropshire, who until 1974 supplied a technician to travel to Chester each week to wind it. The cast iron inscriptions on the clock were made by Cole Brookdale Iron Company, and the ironwork for the tower was made by the firm of James Swindley of Hambridge. James Swindley was John Douglas's cousin. The official opening of the clock was performed on 27th of May 1899, Queen Victoria's 80th birthday. So this is the familiar sight of Chester seen from the walls. This is Chester's Cathedral, which Chris looked round or had a look at earlier in the week. And here's the back end of the bell tower. In February 1969, 9 of the 10 bells in the central tower of the cathedral were removed to be recast by John Taylor & Co. as a ring of 12 bells with a flat sixth. The new bells were cast in 1973, and work on the new bell tower began in February 1973. The 2 old bells, dating from 1606 and 1626, were left in the tower. On the 26th of February 1975, the bells were rung for the first time to celebrate the wedding of a member of the Grosvenor family. The official opening on the 25th of June 75 was performed by the Duke of Gloucester. The belfry is known as the Dean Addleshaw Tower, after the Dean of the Cathedral responsible for its construction. The cathedral is a Church of England cathedral and the mother church of the Diocese of Chester, and it's located within the city of Chester. The cathedral, formerly the Abbey Church of the Benedictine Monastery, dedicated to St Werburgh, is dedicated to Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary, and since 1541 it's been the seat of the Bishop of Chester. The cathedral is a Grade 2 listed building and part of a heritage site that also includes the former monastic buildings to the north, which are also Grade 1 listed. The construction dates from between the 10th century and the early 16th century, having been modified a number of times throughout history, a typical characteristic of English cathedrals. However, the site itself may have been used for Christian worship since the Roman times. Of course, being a Saturday, the walls are extremely busy today with people walking them. It's including, of course, Chris and Smudge. And we're almost back to where we started. You might just recognise this tower. It's the one we see from the canal every time we come into Chester. This is King Charles Tower, and from the perspective of walking along the walls, and here's the entrance into the tower. The tower was once a medieval watchtower, and it's rumoured that King Charles I witnessed the defeat of his royalist army at the Battle of Rowton Moor from the tower. The Battle of Rowton Heath, as it's also known, occurred on the 24th of September 1645 during the English Civil War. Fought by parliamentarians commanded by Sydenham Points and the Royalists under the personal command of King Charles I, it was a significant defeat for the Royalists with heavy losses and prevented Charles from relieving the siege of Chester. The Royalist casualties were high, with 600 killed and 900 taken prisoner. This defeat prevented Charles from relieving the defenders in Chester. We've quite often looked up at the walls as we've cruised the canal below here on our way down to Chester Basin. But this is the viewpoint from the city walls. And you can just see in the distance there the Bridge of Sighs.
One up that tree, one down.
And of course young Smudge can't resist a squirrel. He's never caught one yet, he's never been near one yet, but that doesn't stop him trying to get to one. So we're now standing on top of another road and an archway in the walls, but this is known as Northgate. So we're actually standing on top of the gate. A lovely view of the Welsh hills in the background, in the distance there. Captain Morgan spent weeks defending the city from the Roundheads from this cannon point, using this lookout point, which is now known as Morgan's Mount. Little's known about him, but he defended the city for weeks until a lucky shot from a Roundhead cannon destroyed his cannon mounted here. And below is a monument to his cannon and his defence of the city. They say the march of progress can't be halted, and this bridge that we're stood on now was cut into the wall to allow this modern dual carriageway or ring road to be built round the city. But it cuts the walls clean in half with this new modern concrete bridge. But at least the bridge links up both halves of the city walls, you can see in the distance, over the new road, and then rejoins back onto the existing city walls. For many years the city has seen massive expansion, and these apartment blocks are outside the walls and were recently built about 10 years ago. This structure originated as a circular tower straddling the city walls. During the reign of Queen Anne it was rebuilt as a semicircular tower. It was constructed in 1894 and it's now described as a gazebo, and it's said to be named after John Pemberton, the Mayor of Chester, who stood on it to supervise the work taking place on his nearby rope walk. From this vantage point on the city walls, you can see the railway bridge that we came under after we left Northgate Locks, which you can just make out the handrails through the trees there. We come under the railway bridge and then we turn under the road bridge there into the basin. That brings us nicely back to where we started, at the water tower. Well, thank you very much for joining us on our historical walk around Chester's City Wall, and you found it interesting. Before we go, we need to say a big thank you to our Patreons and our YouTube members, and those of you who have bought us coffees. We really do appreciate your support, so thank you so much, everybody. Well, that's it for now. We will see you next week on Life on Board AmyJo. Bye.